So we're looking at the request body today. So here they say when you need to send data from a client, let's say a browser, to your API, you send it as a request body. Okay. A request body is data sent by the client to your API. A response body is the data your API sends to the client. Your API almost always has to send a response body, but clients don't necessarily need to send request bodies all the time. Sometimes they only request a path, maybe with some path parameters, but don't send a body. Like what we did before when we were studying about path parameters and query parameters. We were not sending a body. We only sent either a path parameter or a query parameter or a path parameter together with a request. A query parameter, but no request body. So they're saying to declare a request body, you use Pydantic models with all their power and benefits. Okay, so they're saying to send data, you should use one of post, which is the more common, put, delete, or patch. Okay, so they're saying sending a body with a GET request has an undefined behavior in the specifications. Nevertheless, it is supported by FastAPI only for very complex or extreme cases. So yeah, we have to make sure to only send data using post, put, delete, or patch. And I'm saying as it is discouraged, the interactive docs with Saga UI won't show the documentation for the body when using get, and proxies in the middle might not support it. So I guess the wise thing to do is to only use post, put, delete, or patch and avoid using get. Okay, so let's continue. So they're saying the first thing is to import Pydantic's base model. First, you need to import base model from Pydantic. Okay, and they say this applies to Python 3.10 and above. Okay, so after that, again, they import FastAPI, they import base model from Pydantic. Then we have here base model. Okay, we have here a class item inheriting from base model. And then we see here base model has name, description, price, and tax. This one is a string, float, and a float. This description by default is none. And we know that from the annotation. It can be either a string or none. And we see that the tax here is a float, which can either be a float or none. And the default value is none. Okay, pretty simple and pretty direct and basic. I hope this makes sense to you. Okay, so after that, we are seeing here there is a declaration, okay, of app. And we know what app is. App is simply an instance of FastAPI. Then, like they recommended, to create anything to do with sending data, use post, put, delete, or if you like what they say, don't use get, but you can use the others. Okay, put, post, delete. What's the other one? Patch. Okay, so they have here a path operation function that takes item and returns the item simply. Okay, and we can copy this. So if I copy this and then come here, remove this code that we had yesterday and paste. And then we run FastAPI main.dev. Okay, application is running successfully. And of course, now here we can test it. Okay, let me expand this to see the port it's running on. I'm going to click on this. So we have that / is it items? what is it? My mind is recalling what we did yesterday. It's items, and this is supposed to be post, by the way. So here I can only send a, what is it called? A get request. So what I can do, I can access the interactive docs, okay? And then execute it. So we have your post, create item. They're saying no parameters. This is good to know. Request body is required, okay? Name, description, tax, blah, blah, blah. Let's go to try it out, okay? And then execute. Let me try to make this smaller so that we can see it properly. So if I execute, here's the response we get, okay? We get a good and clear response, and we see the response headers, the content length, the content type, the date, and the server. Yeah, pretty much okay. All right, so let's continue. Sorry, let's continue. Okay, where's the documentation? Thought I lost it. All right, they say create your data model. Okay, so they're saying then you declare your data model as a class that inherits from base model. Okay, if you take notes, they're simply saying import. Okay, but of course now we have gone ahead of them. We've gone ahead of them and we have done everything. But what this first part only wants us to do is to do this line of code which has been highlighted from Pydantic import base model. Then when we come to this other part, okay, they're saying declare your data model, okay, which inherits from base model. And I already mentioned that. And of course, we see that base model has a name, description, price, tax, okay. This is already covered. We can check and see other variants. And I knew it was going to be something to do with union. Okay, union of either string or none, float or none. For Python 3.8 plus. Okay, but yeah, because we want to be cool, let us stick to 3.10. Then I go ahead and read this. It says the same as when declaring query parameters. When a model attribute has a default value, it is not required. Otherwise, it is required. Use none to make it just optional. And this concept, I think, applies to, like we saw in the previous streams, to query parameters. It applies to path parameters. And now we're also seeing that it applies right here to, what are they called? The request body. Okay. So they're saying, for example, the model above declares a JSON object or a Python dict like this, having a name, description, price, and tax. And of course, with their appropriate values. Okay. So they're saying description and tax are optional with a default value of none. So they're saying this JSON object would also be valid. Is providing something like this, okay? Providing a name and a price, which means, the description and tax are optional. Why? Like they've said, they have a default value of none. So you can either provide or have it none. Very simple and direct. Okay. So let's continue. So you're saying declare it as a parameter. To add it to your path operation, declare it the same way you declared path and query parameters. Okay. And then they highlight the part where you add it. Okay. As simple as that. And of course, we have looked at that in our code. Then they have here other variants, and simply they're showing how to work with Python 3.8, especially when you want to apply what they call them, type hints. Okay, so we are seeing unions, a union of a string, or rather showing us that alternatives. Okay, meaning the description can be the string or optional or none, and the default value is none. So I guess our goal for now is not that, of course, it is something else. So I'll close this because like I told you, we want to be cool and I want to be cool. I want to work with Python 3.10 and above. Okay, so I'll now come down here and say, okay, read, not say, but read what they're saying. They're saying with just that Python type declaration, FastAPI will read the body of the request as JSON. That's the first thing. After that, convert the corresponding types if needed. And we have seen this also applies to path parameters and query parameters. Okay. Then validate the data. If the data is invalid, it will return a nice and clear error indicating exactly where and what was the incorrect data. And I think we are very much aware about this. Okay. Then they're saying it will give you the received data in the parameter item. Okay. And then as you declared it in the function to be of type item, you'll also have all the editor support, completion, among others, for all the attributes and their types. It will generate JSON schema definitions for your model. You can also use them anywhere else you like if it makes sense for your project. Those schemas will be part of the generated Open API schema used by automatic documentation UIs. Okay. And this is what happens. We have seen from the very beginning that this happens, like for literally everything. Okay. They're just trying to reinforce the point. Okay. Okay. But we have seen this with path parameters. We have seen this with query parameters. And now we are seeing it with the request body. Okay. This should not be uh, news to us. Okay. We already know this. But I guess maybe they're putting it here for someone who would come to read about the request body for the first time. Okay. Without knowing what the other documentation, without reading about query parameters and path parameters. Okay. You come to the documentation and the first thing you're reading is request body documentation. Then you'd have to see this. So let's go to the automatic docs. So you're saying the JSON schemas of your models will be part of your Open API generated schema and will be shown in the interactive API docs, like we are seeing here. Okay. First API, we have the schemas, and of course we see it this side. Okay, we see it this side. If I refresh this and open, okay, we have everything right here. Okay, is theirs old or am I not seeing? It's not actually identical. What am I missing? Okay, they have the item. Is that the same thing they're referring to? Yeah, we have this here. Okay, a string required description can be a string or null. The price is a number. Task can be can be a number or null. Okay, and that's very clear to us now. So let's continue. And they say, and also will be used in the API docs inside each path operation that needs them. And that is true. So if we come here and expand this, like we have already seen, we see we have an example value here with the request body, which is required. And like I showed you earlier, the documentation tells us there are no parameters required. Okay, so yeah, uh, pretty cool. Okay, so let's move on. Editor support. In your editor, inside your function, you will get type hints and completion everywhere. This wouldn't happen if you received a dict instead of a Pydantic model. Inside your function, you will get type hints and completion everywhere. This wouldn't happen if you received a dict instead of a Pydantic model. And this is true. Okay. So if we go, actually, what they're doing here, using the dot syntax, okay, you simply say item dot, okay, you see we get everything. Okay. Let me reduce this so that we see, say the description is there. Okay. We have the literally everything. Okay. You can just go through this and using the dot syntax and you'll have what you need. And that's what they're showing us here. Okay. All the operations. Okay. For example, if I say item dot name dot, okay, I get all the string methods. If I say item dot tax dot, I get the methods associated with integers. I mean, or floats. Okay, or rather, if I say item dot description dot, again, I get what is necessary, and this is cool. So simply reinforcing what we already know, that there is editor support. Okay, so let's continue. Then they say you also get error checks for incorrect type operations. Yeah, we know that already. Okay, we know that already, and I think we discovered this in our very first interaction. Then they're saying this is not by chance. The whole framework was built around that design, and I'm learning that right now. And it was thoroughly tested at the design phase before any implementation to ensure it would work for all the editors. There were even some changes to Pydantic itself to support this. The previous screenshots were taken with Visual Studio Code, but you would get the same editor support with PyCharm and most of the other Python editor, coding editors like Cas and whatever. So they have a tip for us here. I think if you use PyCharm as your editor, you can use Pydantic plugin. It improves editor support for Pydantic models with auto-completion, type checks, refactoring, searching, inspections. Yeah, which is really nice. Then the next paragraph says use the model. So inside of the function, you can access all the attributes of the model object directly. Of course, we know that using the dot syntax. Okay, model dot something. Okay, and we can see here they're getting they're using the dot dict, right? Okay, to get the dictionary, the item, but as a dictionary. Okay, then they perform an if statement here to check if item dot tax is not null, none, then they can perform a math operation. Then update that dictionary, then return it. Okay, pretty easy, nothing complex here. So let me just monitor my screen here to make sure everything is flowing well. Okay, so let's continue. So of course they have other variants here, but yeah, we know what they're doing. Unions, and we want Python 3.10 and above. So they're saying a request body path plus path parameters. You can declare path parameters and request body at the same time. Of course, that should be possible. FastAPI will recognize that the function parameters that match path parameters should be taken from the path. For example, here, item ID, which is a path parameter, should match this function parameter, item ID. Okay. Then, and saying, and that function parameters that are declared to be Pydantic models should be taken from the request body. So they're saying FastAPI is smart enough to know this. Okay. So in this case, they know that item should come from the request body. Why? Because it is a Pydantic model. So if I copy this, okay, I want to make sure I've understood. And I paste here, okay, which means if I say comma people, I say maybe comma name str, okay, FastAPI is smart enough to know that item ID is a path parameter, should be taken from the path. Item should be taken from the request body, and name is a required query parameter. So query parameter, request body, path variable. Interesting. So we go. Okay, they're now adding query parameters. So they're saying you can also declare the body, path, and query parameters all at the same time. FastAPI will recognize each of them and take the data from the correct place, which is, of course, expected. Then we have the item. Okay, we have the base model. We have looked at this. And of course, something similar to what I've just given you or told you, that item ID will be, this item ID will be picked from the path. Item will be picked from the request body. Why? Because it is a Pydantic model, and Q is a query parameter and can be a string or none. It's optional. Then we continue to say function parameters will be recognized as follows. If the parameter is also declared in the path, it will be used as a path parameter. Okay. If the parameter is of a singular type like int, float, str, bool, it will be interpreted as a query parameter. We know that. if the parameter is declared to be of type Pydantic model, it will be interrupted. It will be interpreted as a request body. How is it type of a Pydantic model? Simply inherit from base model. As simple as that. Then they're saying not FastAPI will know that the value of Q is not required because of default value equals to none. This. Okay. And then they're saying the str or none or union Python 3.8 is not used by FastAPI to determine that the value is not required. It will know that it's not required because it has a default value of none. Yes. So what determines that something is optional is not because of the annotation, but the value. Okay. That is very important to know. And it's good that they put it here. And I think we actually looked at this. We looked at this way earlier. Then they're saying, but adding the type annotations will allow your editor to give you better support and detect errors. So they go on to say without Pydantic, if you don't want to use Pydantic models, you can also use body parameters. So they're saying see the docs for body, multiple parameters, singular values in body. Okay. So yeah, this is pretty good. So I think we're pretty much done with this. And it's interesting that we have actually gotten done with this earlier. And I just want to keep every session with just one thing. So I think tomorrow we shall be looking at query parameters and string validations, then continue on and on. Yeah, baby steps. Maybe let me quickly click on this link just to have an overview what they're talking about here, because ideally this is something that can be looked at in an advanced stage and not now. So you're saying multiple body parameters. So I'll just skim through this. Okay. So if you look like, for example, here, you see they have two base models. User, come on, they have item and user. They both inherit from base model, and they are both function parameters here. Okay. So we have item, user. So they're saying in this case, FastAPI will expect a body like item first, okay, then user, then importance. Okay. So yeah, interesting. And I think this importance is what they call, if we go up here, I think is the singular value. Okay. But yeah, we shall get to this later. I just wanted to skim through uh, that that part. All right. So yeah, I appreciate you showing up today. Let's go on tomorrow. I think in the next stream we'll be looking at something should be now this other topic, query parameters and string validations. So thank you for showing up. I'll see you in the next